When people pick up anything you've written, for example, their mind isn't on you. Their mind is on their lives, their problems, their activities, their needs. And what you need to do when you write anything, whether it's a sales letter or a website or anything that you're trying to get people to pay attention to, is you have to listen to where are they and match them where they're at. Welcome. You've landed on Zero Limits Living. I'm Dr. Joe Vitale. Every week, I bring you inspiration and information to transform your life. This show's become so popular, you can now see it or hear it on 1,000 platforms across the galaxy. Everything from Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire, YouTube, and probably anything you can mention, probably anything you're using right now. To make this easy for you, I'm putting all the episodes in one place. Go to ZeroLimitsLivingTV.com. You can also sign up to be notified whenever there's a new show. For the most part, there's a new one every Friday. But go to ZeroLimitsLivingTV.com and you won't miss any. Also, people ask about coaching, and coaching's been around for a long time. But you may not know I started my own coaching program almost 20 years ago. It's been trademarked. It is a system that has been tested, a system that works. Find out for yourself if this will work for you. Go to miraclescoaching.com, miraclescoaching.com. And then my latest program, which is really helping people change the past through mental time travel and then create the future they want, is probably something you want to check out. Go to mentaltimetravelsystem.com, mentaltimetravelsystem.com. And then if you know me, my work, or you've followed the show at all, you know I'm an author. And my latest book is called Unexpected Kindness. It's at Amazon, or go to unexpectedkindnessbook.com. Now, usually I have a guest, somebody I've handpicked, somebody that most often wrote a book that I was curious about, but I wanted to do something different on this show. As I mentioned, I am an author, and when you look at the background here, those are real books. That's not a green screen, that's not something fabricated or painted. Those are real books. I've been reading books, collecting books, buying books, sharing books, reviewing books, writing books since I was a kid. And I will turn 70 this year, so I've been doing it a long time. Now, if you are watching and you can see everything visually, you can see on the back of the wall, there's a sign that says "Be Happy." And on that shelf behind the "Be Happy" words are 20 books. Those 20 books have been the most influential in my life. And what I want to do for you is to share about 10 of them in this episode. Now, you may have heard of some, maybe you've read one or two, but you probably don't know all of them. So, what I want to do is share. This is a very informal, personal, unscripted show. I have no notes, but I do have a pile of books beside me, and I'm going to pull one off at a time, and we are going to explore it briefly, enough for you to know why I like it, what's in it, and how it may affect you if you go and read it. Now, the big reason why you need to read books is that it can save you a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. You don't have to go through life and experiment, go through trial and error, and learn on your own. People have gone before you and before me, and they wrote books. They shared their stories, their insights, their secrets, their hacks, anything and everything that could help you and I today. That's one of the best reasons to read a book. Another is for the education. You stretch your mind when you read a book. If you just keep thinking the same old thoughts, you're not going to grow, you're not going to stretch, you're not going to invent, be inspired, do anything, or actually leave your mark in the world. You need to read books. The third reason is for entertainment. I don't read books because it's a chore. I read books because they're entertaining to me. And so these books are handpicked by me because they influence me, and I think they'll influence you. So let's get to the books at hand. If you don't have a pen and paper, you might want to get one. I was learning how to be an author when I was a teenager. And so I read lots of different books, studied lots of different biographies of famous authors. And I was learning all the different techniques and skills of writing to communicate and writing to persuade. But my life transformed somewhere around 1985 or so when I walked into a used bookstore and I was scanning the shelves like I so love to do. And there on the shelf was something called the Robert Collier Letter Book. And I remember staring at the book because I thought, Robert Collier? Robert Collier wrote metaphysical books like The Secret of the Ages and Prayer Works. And I had read his metaphysical spiritual books when I was a teenager. And so here I am as a young adult, struggling, unpublished, unknown, wandering through bookstores, which was one of my favorite things to do. And I see this book called the Robert Collier Letter Book, and I'm thinking, is it the same Robert Collier? And I start reading the book, and I was hypnotized, mesmerized, enthralled, blown away. I ended up going to buy the book from the clerk, and I asked her if it was the same Robert Collier. She thought it was. Bought the book, took it home, started reading it. My life changed. Now, it changed in a business copywriting marketing kind of way, which may or may not interest you, but I have other books that are not about marketing. We'll get to those. The Robert Collier Letter Book showed and explained the sales letters he used to bring millions of dollars of sales during the Great Depression, before the Great Depression in the United States. In fact, the first edition of this book had come out in the 1930s, and I believe he updated this one right before he died, somewhere around 1950. So as I read this book, I learned how to be a better writer. In fact, I said I was a copywriter, an ordinary writer before the Robert Collier Letter Book. I read it and I became a hypnotic writer afterwards. And it led to me writing a book called Hypnotic Writing, which is still on Amazon, still in print, one of my proudest books. And it was my very first ebook, Hypnotic Writing. But you can trace it all to the Robert Collier Letter Book. So a couple things I learned from Robert Collier is that, first of all, people love stories. We communicate with a story. We persuade with a story. We convey information with a story. How did I just tell you about the Robert Collier Letter Book? With a story. The other thing I learned is that he matches where he suspects people are. And what that means is when people pick up anything you've written, for example, their mind isn't on you. Their mind is on their lives, their problems, their activities, their needs. And what you need to do when you write anything, whether it's a sales letter or a website or anything that you're trying to get people to pay attention to, is you have to listen to where are they and match them where they're at. In Robert Collier's day, they used the phrase that you have to board the subway train in the direction it's already going. I love the Robert Collier Letter Book, and so I'm leading with it. In fact, I will tell you 25 years ago, when my first wife had passed away and I had gone to box up books, the only books that I put in my car, the rest were all boxed to be shipped. The only books were 3 books, and one of them was the Robert Collier Letter Book. It was so important to me that I was not going to leave it in the hands of somebody boxing books and possibly losing it. And this edition I'm holding is the very one I found in that secondhand bookstore in Houston a lifetime ago, the Robert Collier Letter Book. That's what we're going to start with. The next book is a self-help classic. It's Cybernetics. Cybernetics came out around 1960. I reread it recently and I thought, oh, good Lord, I can burn all other self-help books. Nothing has ever come to the power and clarity of Cybernetics. Maxwell Maltz wrote Cybernetics. He was a plastic surgeon. And what he discovered is that even when he would change people's faces and their nose and how they look and other parts of their body, they often didn't notice the change. They still acted the same. They still had the same problems and insecurities, even though they were transformed physically in the way that they wanted and paid to have happen. And Maxwell Maltz found out that what was going on was in the mind. You can change the outer, but until you change the inner, the problems can still remain. This was a dramatic insight, and it's still a dramatic insight today because Maxwell Maltz, in this great book, Cybernetics, goes on to talk about there's a part of your mind that is kind of like a goal seeking radar. You have to tell the servo mechanism, as he called it, what you want. And then that part of your mind will go out into the world, sensing all the possibilities that are out there, and will help guide you to what will help you achieve and attract what you want. Now, Maxwell Maltz wrote this book in such a way that it is so easy to understand that even today, at our time and our time period, it all makes sense. It all works right now. I'm reading a passage, I just opened it up, and he says, remember, the creative guidance mechanism within you is a goal striving mechanism. And the first requisite for using it is to have a clear cut goal or target to shoot for. A great many people want to improve themselves and long for a better personality, but they have no clear cut idea of what that looks like. This is an incredible book. And in many ways, I would tell you that if you really want to improve and have a method and a manual to take you there, Cybernetics is probably the only book you need. And yes, I still have a little stack to go through, but I love this book so much. I think it is a masterpiece. If you were going to choose one book to walk around with and study over coffee breaks and lunches for the rest of your life, it would be Cybernetics. That's how powerful it is. And now, let's go to something else that you probably never heard of. Percy Ross was independently wealthy, and what he decided to do towards the end of his life was to give his money away. And he started writing a newspaper column. And that newspaper column was one where he talked about how to ask for what you want. And he invited people to write to him and ask for what they wanted. He's a billionaire, remember? He can grant some of these requests. And he learned that a whole lot of people don't know how to ask for what they want, partly because they don't know what they want, and partly because they're very shallow and self-serving in their request. They're not thinking of what's in it for Percy Ross and what's in it for me getting my request that'll enable me to help other people. So Percy Ross, after years of doing his column and years of giving away money, wrote a book called Ask for the Moon and Get It. Ask for the Moon and Get It. It came out in paperback. It came out in hardcover. This happens to be a rare signed hardcover book. The subtitle is The Secret to Getting What You Want by Knowing How to Ask. Now, I want to tell you a behind the scenes story on how this book has influenced me. I loved it when I first read it, and I've reread it several times. I haven't read it in many years at this point, but I want to because it's so delicious. But Ask for the Moon and Get It by Percy Ross taught me to pay attention to when people make requests or state questions to me. For example, for many years now, I've been taking questions from people in my Miracles Coaching program. I mentioned Miracles Coaching at the beginning of this show. Go to miraclescoaching.com, check it out. The people that are enrolled in the program, once a month, or maybe now it's every couple months, they can ask me personally any question that's on their mind. And I do my best to be focused, to be present, to listen, to reply with some sort of wisdom, inspiration, a how-to that'll make a difference to them. But I've noticed that when people ask a question, they reveal their secret agenda that's within the question that they may not hear themselves. I got this ability from Percy Ross's book. So I'm recommending it for at least two reasons. One is he teaches you how to make requests. All of us ask for things from other people. And in fact, I've been saying for a while now that everything you want comes through other people. It doesn't fall out of the sky. It comes through other people. So you need to know how to work with other people. You need to know how to make requests of other people. That's the first level of understanding that you get from his book. The second level is when people ask you for things, you pay attention to how they're wording their question so you can find out if they're actually just wanting something for their own self-indulgence and they're not thinking of you or a larger purpose or a larger way to impact the world. So, Ask for the Moon and Get It is well worth reading. It's by Percy Ross. One of my favorite memories, a little sidebar story, is that when I was a kid, this would have been in the early 1970s, late 1960s, I told my mother about the book, and she bought a little paperback version of Ask for the Moon and Get It, and she read it. And it's one of the few times in my life that I found somebody in my family that would read a book and read one that I had read and recommended. That goes way back. It also tells you how far away when I first read this book, probably in the 1960s. Ask for the Moon and Get It, Percy Ross would be the next on my list. The next one you definitely have heard of. I've talked about it. Everybody talks about it. This one book alone has made more men, more women millionaires than any other book in history. As far as we know, with all the stories, with all the reviews, with all the sales for this book, and as long as this book's been around, it has impacted more people in their financial security and attracting wealth and prosperity than any other book. What am I talking about? Maybe you've guessed. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Now, this book came out in the 1930s, and there's a lot of background to it. I was filmed a year or so ago for a movie talking about Napoleon Hill and the story of Think and Grow Rich, and I was in that particular movie. So there's a lot of biography, a lot of stories behind the book, but the book has stood the test of time. So if you have not read Think and Grow Rich, then by God, put it on your list and go read it now. There's all kind of versions available. This happens to be a beautiful leather one that is probably only $15 on Amazon. Wherever you get it and read it. Now, as I'm talking about Napoleon Hill, this really isn't the book that I want to focus on when it comes to Mr. Hill. The book I want to focus on is another one he wrote. He wrote a lot of books, but this other one was not published during his lifetime. And it was not published during his lifetime because it was considered to be too dangerous, too controversial, too threatening. And so the book was not published until 70 years after Napoleon Hill died. When the book came out, I bought it and started to read it, and I didn't really connect to it. And it made me a little uncomfortable. And so I put it aside. And then friends of mine were asking me, have you read Napoleon Hill's book, The Lost Manuscript, that was published? And I said, well, I started it. And because of their prompting, I went and read more of the book. And as I read the book, I started to sweat. I started to realize the power of this book. And the book I'm talking about is Outwitting the Devil. Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. Why is this book so powerful? When I first started reading it, I thought he was talking about a devil, like in the Christian religion and many other religions. We have this God, we have this angel, we have this devil. So he was making the devil feel too real for me, and it made me uncomfortable. But as I read the book, I realized what he was actually talking about. The devil in Outwitting the Devil is your own mind. It's your mind. When I was filming in Los Angeles many years ago, and I had a studio audience, and they were filming me for a TV show that was being aired out there. And there was a fellow who came up from the studio audience, and we sat down and we started talking about Napoleon Hill. And I asked him if he had read Outwitting the Devil, and he did. And you saw his face go pale. And we talked about how the devil is our own mind, and we have to outwit our own mind. And he understood, and he was relating to the story, and we were bonding over that moment. And I realized everybody needs to read this book. We need to read this book because the voices we listen to in our head aren't necessarily serving us or protecting us or helping us. They're voices of deceit and deception and manipulation and mischief beyond belief. And those voices are you, at least an aspect of you. And so Outwitting the Devil will help you become aware of the negative voice in your own mind that will talk you out of things. Even right now, as I'm telling you about all these different books, part of you might be saying, I don't have any time to read. Is that the part that is helping you? The part that is saying, I don't have any time to read, is lying to you. It is deceiving you. It is keeping you from your own good and your own growth. That's the devil in you, according to the way Napoleon Hill described it. This is an awakening book. This is the kind of book to really help you become more powerful because you become more in control of your own mind. Very powerful. So definitely, yes, read Think and Grow Rich, but definitely Outwitting the Devil. It's a very easy read, but in my mind, a disturbing read, and disturbing in a good way, a positive way. All right, let's keep going here. You know, the movie The Secret came out in 2006, and you've probably seen it. I was in the movie, so maybe you're here because you saw me in that movie, and that's how you know me. But whether you saw The Secret or not, the story behind The Secret is that Rhonda Byrne, the producer, had gone through a dark night. And I believe it was her daughter who handed her a book that was published in 1910, a book that has largely been forgotten. And Rhonda went on to say that was the book that transformed her. The spark of inspiration to create the movie The Secret came from her reading that book. That book became her life raft. And that book is called The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles. It first came out in 1910. And in fact, the original title of it was, well, it's not in this particular book, but it was about creative wealth. And the subtitle was The Science of Getting Rich. But they apparently found out after a couple editions of printing the book that The Science of Getting Rich was a better title, and they made it that. This book came out in 1910. What you may not know is that there was a woman publisher. This is 1910, remember, Elizabeth Towne. And Elizabeth Towne had her own magazine, her own publishing company. She was an author of many different books. She was a powerhouse figure in the New Thought movement, and she published a lot of those New Thought authors that today you might know of because of the movie The Secret and spin-off reasons, where you went and started doing some reading and took you down rabbit trails and you discovered all these other authors. Elizabeth Towne discovered them too in the 1900s. She discovered Wallace Wattles. She published this book as well as a couple others by him. Now, the reason I want you to read this book and the reason it is so profoundly useful to me and to you today is the clarity of the insights that are in this book are almost crystal clear in their message. For example, a lot of people who saw the movie The Secret criticized it because they said the movie was about magical thinking. It was about creating a Harry Potter universe, the Wizard of Oz kind of experience. You want something, you click your heels, and it shows up at your front door. Well, I believe in magic and miracles. One of my books is called The Miracle, and I have a miracles coaching program. So my mind does allow that. But I also know that everything you want comes through physical reality, just like everything you want comes through other people. And one of the things Wallace Wattles said was, anything and everything that you want will come through, and here's the words, natural means. Natural means. This is why sometimes when people create some dramatic change in their life because of the movie The Secret, because of a book like The Science of Getting Rich, and then they go to tell everybody about it, when the other people hearing the story start questioning, they break it down to physical reality and they miss the magic that made it happen. For example, I've told the story on previous shows of Andres Pira. Andres Pira was a young man I met in Thailand years ago. He brought me over there for a speaking seminar. When I met him, he told me a profound story of how he had been homeless 20 years before, homeless, nothing. And he asked for help from a friend, and the friend gave him the book, The Secret. And so Andres was mad. He said, I need money. I need food. I don't need a book. And he read the book and decided it was all hogwash. And he said, I'm going to prove this book wrong. I'm going to prove this book doesn't work. And so Andre starts doing visualization, intention, manifestation principles that are all in the movie and in the book, The Secret. And lo and behold, he starts manifesting little things like a cup of coffee, lunch, apartment, part-time job. Long story short is 15 years later, when I'm meeting Andres Pira in Thailand at the airport, when he picks me up, he's a billionaire, a billionaire. And he had 20 businesses at that time, last I heard. And there was everything from a petro shop to an attorney's thing to a gym to coffee shops and all these other things. The young man's 35 years old. He was homeless 20 years before, 10 years before. And here he is, a billionaire. So when he tells the story, if people just look at what he accomplished, they then start saying, well, what's his main business? And I'll say, well, it's real estate. And then in their mind, they go, oh, aha, well, there's lots of money in real estate, completely dismissing the fact that Andres used the science of getting rich and the secret to manifest the money that came through real estate. It came through natural means. This is very profound because a lot of people are misled, usually by their own thinking, because they think what they want is going to happen in a Harry Potter kind of way. And what it does is happen in a magical and miraculous way, but through natural means. That's the power of the science of getting rich. This is a leather-bound exact copy of the 1910 version that's on Amazon now. So you can go get it, and you can probably find it as a PDF or an ebook or a freebie online somewhere. Get it, read it, and reread it. The Science of Getting Rich. Now, I know some of the books I talked to you about you have heard of, and some of the books you've never heard of. This one you've probably never heard of. Back during the Great Depression, there was an insurance salesman who gave a brief little talk to one of the groups that were meeting back then. And that brief little talk was titled A Fortune to Share. And it was so powerful and so inspiring that a publisher walked up to him and said, you know, if you expand that talk, I will turn it into a book and we will print it. Well, the author did that. A Fortune to Share came out, and Vash Young, his name, became a best-selling author during the Great Depression. Fortunes for All was his later book and his last book. Fortunes for All is what I'm holding up because Vash Young, after all of that success and all of the books he wrote between A Fortune for All and Fortunes for All, he wrote his final words here. And I found it so profound because when he first wrote his book, A Fortune to Share, which was the first one, A Fortune to Share, it was all about the power of the mind. He had discovered that there was this factory in his head. He was using terms from the 1930s. There was a factory in his head that can produce good stuff or produce bad stuff. And that factory was his mind. Well, that factory is your mind. And you can produce good stuff, you can produce bad stuff, depending on what part of the factory you're operating and who you're getting to make more of it. You are in charge. You're the manager of that factory in your head. But the reason I'm holding up Fortunes for All, which was his last book before Vash Young died, is because he tells the stories of how everything happened in his life. And there's one page in here that I found so dramatic because he said, take a piece of paper, and on that piece of paper, write down everything you want to have, do, or be. And then he pushed a little bit and said, add to it. Said, don't leave anything out. Make this an inventory of your dreams. This is a complete list of your goals. And he says, nobody else is going to see it. So put the secret stuff on there too. The stuff you secretly desire, but you're not going to tell anybody. Put it on your list. And then after he encouraged you to make this complete inventory of all of your desires, he said, now read it. And he says, how do you feel as you read it? And he was pointing out that you feel really good because it's exciting to make this wish list. These are all the things you want to have, do, or be. It's like the Christmas list. It's really fantastic. And then he went further to say, okay, how will it feel when you have everything? When you have whatever you put on the list, it has come true. You have manifested. It is yours. How do you feel? And of course, you feel exhilarated. You feel fantastic. It's kind of like winning the lottery of life, and everything is there. And then here's the punchline. You're already feeling it. You want all this stuff so you will feel better. But by pretending you have all this stuff, you already feel better. What you want all that stuff for is to feel better. And by just looking at the list and pretending you already have everything on the list, you can feel better now. It was a shortcut to bliss. And this came from Vash Young, Fortunes for All. I would say go dig up Vash Young's books because he wrote several books. I don't have them all in front of me, but thank you. Let's start all over again. And a few other ones were out there. And his name is Vash, Vash, and Young, Young. And you too have now inherited his fortune because you already had it in your mind. All right. When I was a kid growing up, I wanted to be a lot of different things. I wanted to be the new Harry Houdini. I wanted to be the new Jack Dempsey. I wanted to be a version of Babe Ruth. So my child mind was playing with scenarios. And I was reading lots of books about how to do it. I was reading self-improvement books, self-help books, pop psychology books. Wasn't thinking anything about those terms in the 1960s. I was just reading books that might help me feel good and help me achieve things. And I had big dreams. The book that was the turning point for me, and I give credit to this book even today. I've repeatedly said this is the single book that transformed my ability to create. And I probably read it around 1968, 1970, somewhere in there. The book had come out decades before that, and the book's still in print today. What I'm talking about is The Magic of Believing by Claude Bristol. The Magic of Believing. I cannot convey to you just how powerful this book has been in my life. I remember as a kid, I would play ping pong with my father, and he would always beat me, and I was always discouraged by it. So I'm reading The Magic of Believing, and Claude Bristol kept encouraging me to visualize what I wanted, visualize the end result. And when I could visualize it and really believe that it could happen, then it could happen. So I was reading The Magic of Believing. I'm visualizing playing ping pong with my father, and I saw myself beating him. This is all in my head. And at first, I wasn't convinced it was real. I couldn't get myself to even believe in my own mind, let alone in reality, that I can beat my father. But I kept visualizing, and then I got it locked in. And I remember thinking, this can work. This can be true. This could actually happen. And then I looked over, and my father was reading the paper, and I said, Dad, let's go play ping pong. He dropped the paper. He's always ready to beat his son. And we went to the basement in Ohio, and we got the ping pong table and the paddles, and we played, and I beat him. I beat him. I still remember the look of confusion on his face. I don't know that to this day that I ever told him it was because I read The Magic of Believing. But for me, this is where it all starts. The Magic of Believing is considered a success classic. It has influenced more people. I think Phyllis Diller, go Google her if you don't know who she is. Liberace, go Google him if you don't know who he was. And a lot of other greats all said The Magic of Believing is what changed their lives, and they credited it to a lot of their success. The Magic of Believing by Claude Bristol. Easily available, been available for a very long time. I'd put it on your reading list. So another book, I know you've never heard of this unless you were a diehard, in-depth follower of me, is a book about emotional appeal. In fact, the book is called The Magic Power of Emotional Appeal. And I absolutely love this book. It deeply influenced me when I was learning about marketing and copywriting and persuasion, because when you're writing sales letters, you're basically a stranger writing to a stranger, asking them to give money for something they haven't seen or felt, or maybe not even going to receive for a while. There's a great deal of power in learning persuasion techniques. And the magic power of emotional appeal was more than just sales letter. This is how we communicate with other people. This is how parents communicate with their children. This is how we need to communicate when we're trying to get something, a legal bill passed. We need to think of emotional appeal. And what Roy Garn did was say there were four key emotional appeal hot buttons, four of them. He simplified it to such an extent that I could read it and go, oh, that makes total sense. And then he illustrated it with such clear writing that I felt like this is the classic, that all I have to do is look at this book and be remembered of his principles, and I'll be able to go with it. For example, in his chapter called Money as an emotional appeal, He has two signs. These are traffic signs. And the one sign says speed limit 20 miles an hour. You've seen those. I've seen those. But the second sign says 20 miles an hour or $189 fine. Wow. Which one gets your attention? So the money appeal in this example is what we're appealing to. And unless we know about these appeals, we do like everybody else, and we're just putting up a lame sign that doesn't make anybody take any action. We just speed right through that speed limit sign because it didn't really convey something we paid attention to. It didn't write to us in terms that touched us. And that's what The Magic Power of Emotional Appeal does, by Roy Garn. I will warn you, trying to find this book in printed form is going to be very difficult, and it's going to be very expensive. I'm told it's because of me. I've been talking about this book for 4 decades. And so the word is out that this book is something you want to read, and all the copies have been cleaned up. But just do the research, do the searching, because you're bound to find a paperback, or maybe there's something online where some kind soul made it available as an ebook. The Magic Power of Emotional Appeal, Roy Garn, Garn. This is another self-help classic that has been around for a very long time. You've probably heard of it. The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. This is by Joseph Murphy. And this is the book that awakened me to the reality that there's at least 2 aspects to my mind and to yours. You have the conscious mind, you have the subconscious. Most of us are living in the world of the conscious, and we're thinking that that's what's in charge because we hear our thoughts, we're making our decisions. And so it feels like that's the operating playing field, the conscious mind. But it's not. The subconscious is bigger, vaster, deeper, richer. It has all of your memories, it has all of your beliefs, it has everything. And some say going back to previous lives, all stored in the subconscious mind. The wonderful thing about Joseph Murphy is that he tells you how to use your subconscious mind. He tells you how to operate your conscious to reach your subconscious, and then your subconscious becomes an ally for you and what you want to achieve. So you've probably heard of this book, but again, have you read it? Not. Today may be the day. The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. And again, this is going to be a book you probably have not heard of. Back in the 1970s, there was a very controversial self-help seminar called EST, E-S-T. And S stood for Erhard Seminar Training. And it made a lot of news because it was very confrontational. It was very theatrical. It was very dramatic. It was very unusual. It was very colorful. And there was a lot of controversy around it. Major magazines, newspapers, TV shows, 60 Minutes, everybody was doing stories on EST. What you may not know is that one of the most powerful books related to EST was a novel that was written in such a clarifying, vivid, and emotional way that you read it and feel like you're in the room during the EST training. The book is called The Book of EST by Luke Reinhardt. When I told you earlier that when I left Houston after my wife had died and I had had all my books packed up, boxed up, and I said there were only 3 books that I put on the car seat beside me as I was driving to my new life. And one of those books was the Robert Collier letter book. The second book was the Book of EST. Why? This book is so alive. It is written so well. It has such gems of insight and wisdom, and it has the safety of being a book. Meaning, had you gone through the EST experience in the 1970s, you might have been intimidated by their roaring in your face kind of way of helping people change. But you can have a similar feeling simply by reading the book. I so love this book that a decade or so ago, I found the author, Luke Reinhardt, who had also written a novel that influenced me when I was in high school called The Dice Man. I interviewed the author way back when, and I arranged to republish the Book of EST. I published the Book of EST 10 years ago because it was going out of print. I loved the book. I wanted it to be in print. Sadly, today, Luke Reinhardt has passed on. His book is now back out of print. and you're going to have to look to find a copy of it. But I find them in bookstores. I find them online. I find them around. It's in paperback. It's in hardcover. So I think you can find the Book of EST. As a novel, you can read it and enjoy it. But as a self-help novel, you can read it and be transformed forever. The Book of EST, Luke Reinhardt. All right, I have two more books to show you here. This other one, I'm sure you've seen the movie because this book came out in 1913. 1913. It's a children's book. And I saw the movie just like you, and I saw all the remakes maybe like you, but I went back and read the original book that came out in 1913, and it fried me. It was so entertaining, so educational, and so enlightening all at the same time. I'm talking about Pollyanna. Pollyanna by Eleanor Porter, known as the Glad Book. Now, I reread the book as I saw one of the remakes of the movie, and I was fascinated, and I said, I want to know more about the Glad game. I want to know more about Pollyanna, and particularly the author, Eleanor Porter. A lot of people will degrade Pollyanna and the term Pollyanna. You probably said, and you probably heard people say, oh, don't be a Pollyanna, or I don't want to be a Pollyanna. And that's a complete misunderstanding because Pollyanna did not dismiss reality. And in fact, in the book, she goes through a car accident. She goes through being crippled. She goes through some very dark nights. And during those moments, she's not glad. And she can't even play the glad game. But she learned it's an exercise in optimism, that you can, with the power of your choice, go and look for the good or the glad in every situation and in every person. I really wanted to write a biography about Eleanor Porter, but I couldn't find enough information on her. I know that she was a journalist, that she was a singer, that she wrote two of the Pollyanna books, the first two. The rest were all written by ghostwriters. So there was maybe a dozen after that. But Eleanor Porter defended Pollyanna by saying Pollyanna did not deny reality or stick her head in the sand. Pollyanna said, we have challenges, we have darkness, but we can look in those challenges and in those darkness, and we can find the good. It's always there, but we have to look. When I reread the book from 1913 fairly recently, I marveled at how it made me feel like I was reading a movie, meaning there's so much action and so much dialogue in the book that it's breezy reading. It makes you feel like you're part of the experience of living with Pollyanna. So I strongly recommend reading the book. Yes, you can go watch the movie. There's several versions of it, all the way back to Mary Pickford with a silent version to the famous Haley Mills one with Disney. But the book, there's lots of editions. And in fact, this is a relatively new edition from the 1913 book, Pollyanna, the Glad Book by Eleanor Porter. Read it. And then the last book that I have here that I pulled off of my shelf that are behind the Be Happy sign is a timeless bestseller that was just updated and expanded by the daughter of the man who wrote the first book. Much like Napoleon Hill, Dale Carnegie was around in the early days. And I think it was in the 1930s, he wrote the famous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a masterpiece. It is a masterpiece. I wish I had written this book. I have read it and reread it, and I've marveled at Dale Carnegie and how he was able to write this. But as many things go, he went through evolutions with this book. There were earlier editions of it. He kept rewriting it, expanding it, adding stories to it until he published his masterpiece. And then most recently, it's been updated. And as I mentioned, it's just been revised and expanded by his daughter. How to Win Friends and Influence People. What's amazing to me is that so many of us are so focused on ourselves that we don't think about other people. And yet the secret to success is when you think about other people. The secret to manifesting what you want is to realize it comes through other people. This goes all the way back to Wallace Wattles talking about things come through natural means. It goes all the way back to Percy Ross, who's talking about when you ask for the moon and get it, you have to think of what other people are going to get from your request. So Dale Carnegie is pointing out you must focus on the other person. You must. The other person is preoccupied with themselves, just like you're preoccupied with yourself. And so you have to be aware of this and use this to your advantage. The other thing you have to be aware of when dealing with other people is they never think they're wrong. You may think they're wrong. You may find evidence to prove they're wrong in whatever they're doing, whatever they're thinking, writing, or believing, but they don't think they're wrong. Dale Carnegie told some pretty amazing stories of some criminals, and the criminals did things that were very clearly wrong. And yet, when the criminals were interviewed and stories were written about them, you clearly saw that the criminals never thought they did anything wrong. In their world, in their mind, within their own beliefs, they were doing what they thought was right. When we deal with other people, we need to consider that where they're coming from is where they live. It's their home. It is their natural surroundings, and they believe they are right, even when you believe opposite of that. So this is how to work with other people, which is why it's called How to Win Friends and Influence People, a masterpiece by Dale Carnegie. Go and read it. Now, in the last few minutes I have, I want to mention a couple things. I mentioned I've written a lot of books, everything from the Unexpected Kindness book, The Awakened Millionaire, The Attractor Factor, The Miracle. I've written 80 some books, so I'm not going to possibly remember them all right here. But what I've done is I put together a package for you. And this is a 3-program for $3 package. At the bottom of the bar on every one of my shows, it always says, get Dr. Joe's $3 for 3 programs, or 3 programs for $3 program. And you just go to zerolimitsmethod.com, zerolimitsmethod.com, and you can have them. Zerolimitsmethod.com. I also want to point out that I said that I answer questions in the Miracles Coaching Program. All of those have been turned in, or most of those have been turned into transcripts, which became books. There's now 3 volumes called Miracles Manual, Volume 1, 2, and 3. They are my answers, the questions and answers in the Miracles Coaching Program. You can have those books. Go to miraclesmanual.com, miraclesmanual.com, and you can have that. So I don't want to spend more time talking about me. I learned from Dale Carnegie, for example, and I want to focus more on you. Go back and rewatch this and find the books that really jumped out at you, that you really felt curious about, and go find them and go read them. And my only request is, if you like this particular episode, please leave a comment. And what I personally would like to know is, what books influenced you? Do you have a top 10 list, or a top 5 list, or a top 1 list? Sometimes all you have to do is take one book and you can live with it. Bob Proctor, who was also in The Secret, and he's the reason I wrote my book, Unexpected Kindness, had said that he kept the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill with him every day of his life. From 1967 to when he died, I think in 2022, Bob Proctor had that book and he looked at it every single day. That's how powerful that book was to him. So you can pick a book by any of the people I brought up today. One of my books, there's lots of success literature out there. It's been published since the 1800s and until even now, and more is coming out today than at any other time in history. So find a book that you love, start studying it, leave a comment to let me know which book of mine you really liked, which book I recommended that you really liked, which book that you've read on your own that you really liked. And then the last favor is tell people about the show. It's growing by leaps and bounds. This is called Zero Limits Living. I'm putting all of the shows at zerolimitslivingtv.com. You can watch the shows on 1,000 platforms or listen to them. Everything from Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and more. Be sure to check out Miracles Coaching, miraclescoaching.com. Check out mentaltimetravelsystem.com. Check out my book, Unexpected Kindness. All of my books are at Amazon, so you can go on over there and just pack a lunch and start ordering different books and reading them on your Kindle if you want. I want to thank Lux Media Studios for making this show possible. Candace Barr for inviting me to do this show a year and a half or so ago. Look at us now. And Chris and Nick are doing the engineering. Chris is running the camera, I think, today. I want to thank all of you for spending your time with me. You are the ones making a difference in the world. You are the ones bringing the light to the planet itself. Thank you. I love you. Expect miracles.
Glutathione is a big word. It's the body's own master antioxidant. It's a scavenger for free radical, bacteria, and viruses. There are no products in the market with the ingredient NASET. NASET increases the production of glutathione that's in our body already to strengthen and enhance our immune system, elevate sense of well-being, support muscle strength and endurance, cognitive function, and liver support. It helps with increased energy and blood sugar regulation. Get your bottle of GSH Plus from www.salvationnutra.com.